Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah and this is Medicated Housewife DIY, where crafting and mental health come together. Now it's time I got really personal with you. My name is Sarah and I hate pumpkins. Now I know that's not a popular opinion and I am not trying to be the Grinch of Halloween or anything like that. And I know plenty of YouTubers have made some gorgeous pumpkin decor, and I am not trying to take anything away from them. Me personally, I'm just not feeling the pumpkins. But it is the fall, and that means it's pumpkin decor season. So today's video is all about making pumpkins that I won't hate. And I hope you guys don't hate them either, and maybe you'll actually like them. And we're gonna have our own little pumpkin palooza. So let's go make some stuff and jump right into this. To begin with, for our 5 different DIY fall decor pumpkins, we used some of these foam pumpkins from the Dollar Tree. I removed the tags, and I began with giving them a generous coat of this Waverly chalk paint in white. And these foam pumpkins generally take about 2 to 3 coats of paint to fully cover them. I also painted one in a greenish color and another in a beigey brown color. The stems are made of foam too, and they can be easily removed so that you can paint them as well. I also picked up a couple of these mini real pumpkins. I guess they're technically gourds. They're about 69 cents each, and I got 3 of them, and I decided to paint one of them glossy black, and the other, I had something else planned for the others. Now I know that this technique is not new, but I'm using brown lunch bags from the Dollar Tree to make some assorted stems for all my pumpkins. You could also use brown craft paper for this, or ordinary grocery bags, but I cut the bottom off the lunch bag and cut each one in half, and we're going to use a 1-to-1 mixture of water and craft glue from the Dollar Tree, and we're going to generously paint the glue mixture onto the brown paper bag to coat it. I have not seen it before, but I did have a bunch of long pipe cleaners from another project, and I thought it might make the stems more pliable if I used these pipe cleaners rolled up inside the brown paper stems. I also used the original stem from the foam pumpkins next to the pipe cleaners when I rolled them, so the stems would be easier to reattach back onto the pumpkins. I ended up using 2 to 4 pipe cleaners folded over in half for each of the stems. I'm then going to generously paint the glue and water mixture onto each piece of the brown paper bag, making sure to coat both the front and the back of each sheet thoroughly. The glue mixture makes this a very messy part of the project, and I suggest that you have some paper towels nearby because you're probably going to need them. And then I proceeded to roll the paper tightly around the pipe cleaners, twisting and shaping them as I went along. And I wanted them to resemble real stems, which are far from perfect, so very irregular, and each one kind of unique looking. When shaping the stems, I also snipped some openings at the base of the stem to fold over the paper, and it would look more realistic when they're put back onto the pumpkins. And on a couple of the stems, I cut some slits at the top and twisted them around for a more realistic effect overall. I definitely made more stems than I actually needed because they're easy to make, and I wanted to have more of a choice of which ones looked best on which pumpkin. Once the stems are fully dry, I decided to paint them. I'm using my Waverly Antique Wax. I love this stuff. I mean, is there anything you can't use Waverly Antique Wax on? Anything. I'm using a dry brush, and the wax is really to just deepen the color of these stems. Like, there are no rules to this. You really just don't want any of the stems to look identical, so you just want to have fun with it but darken them up. I had picked up a bag of these autumn leaves at Dollar Tree, and these come in a package with green, yellow, orange, and I think some gold, brightly colored leaves. So I really wanted to tone them down a lot before I used them on my pumpkins. I wasn't sure which I would end up using, but I wanted a couple to choose from, so I painted several. So when the paint is dry on the stems, I took out some of this Martha Stewart metallic gold acrylic paint that I love. It's from my stash. I don't even know if they still make this color, but I've been using the same bottle like forever. I wanted to dry brush some gold accents and highlights on the edges and the crevices of the stem. And some of them I wanted to have more of a gold tone, and others I wanted to keep the gold really subtle. You want to make sure your brush is dry, and you just want to start brushing that on there, however much makes you happy. I used the gold in varying degrees on all of the stems that I had. The first Fall Decor Pumpkin is going to be wrapped in raffia. You can get raffia at Dollar Tree, but my Dollar Tree did not have any, so I ended up buying a roll of raffia on Amazon. And to begin with, I did a simple braid of the raffia. I enlarged the roll in the middle of the pumpkin with a screwdriver first, and I made a makeshift needle out of a skewer taped to the raffia and sewed the raffia through the middle of the pumpkin around the outside of the pumpkin. My original plan was to cover the entire pumpkin with the braided raffia, but you will see later in the video that I didn't like the way the braids looked, so I removed most of them and instead just used the braids in the main crevice of the pumpkin, just sort of emphasizing them. And after that, I went back in and started covering the remainder of the pumpkin with plain unbraided raffia. I also used some hot glue every couple of stitches to secure the raffia in place so it wouldn't start to shift on its own. Once I finished the crevices with the braids, I went back and filled in all the remaining orange pumpkin spaces with plain unbraided raffia, using the same makeshift skewer needle method to sew the raffia through the middle of the pumpkin, also gluing the raffia down every couple of stitches to keep it from shifting to help it stay in place. And I did this until the entire pumpkin was covered with the raffia. I didn't like the way the braided raffia looked at all at this point, so I took out my nautical rope, unraveled it, and took the two-piece twisted rope. I took one piece out and I glued it down into the crevices around the pumpkin, and I liked the way that looked much better. I then chose the stem I thought looked the best and grabbed a couple of my painted leaves and assembled the top of my pumpkin. And this is how the first of my 5 DIY fall decor pumpkins turned out. This pumpkin was so interesting to me because initially, using all the raffia to make this one, I assumed it would be really earthy or boho looking, but the wrapped raffia actually looks a little like silk to me, and I think it gives the pumpkin a much more sophisticated vibe than what I initially intended it to be. But I am all for happy accidents, so let me know in the comments what this pumpkin says to you. For pumpkin number 2, I also bought a couple of these glitter pumpkin lights at Dollar Tree, which, let's face it, are super cute for Halloween, but not for decor. So if off camera I had just taken some Dollar Tree spackle and slathered it all over the pumpkin, filling in the face cutouts and covering up most of the glitter. Once it was fully dry, I sanded it a little to make it smooth and grabbed some river rocks and a bag of white rocks, both from the gardening section of Dollar Tree. I decided to use the river rocks along the crevices of the pumpkin, so I filled those in first using Gorilla Glue hot glue sticks to secure the hold. Then I filled the remaining spaces with the white rocks until the entire pumpkin was covered. I had then used a little metallic gold acrylic paint to liven up the existing stem that was already on the pumpkin. And this is how pumpkin number 2 turned out. I think this is a unique little pumpkin and it can fit in anywhere. I like it displayed on a pedestal to give it a little height. This is a super easy project that anyone can do, and I think it has a very high-end look to it. You could also use any other kind of stone or pebbles to customize it to your liking. Moving on to pumpkin number 3 for this project, since I seem to be the only one that cannot for the life of me find the Dollar Tree faux leather ribbon. And believe me, you guys, I have looked. I bought this faux leather tape on Amazon. I will link it for you below in the description. It acts like duct tape, and if you fold over both edges of it before using it, it can most definitely look like a small leather strap. I had painted this pumpkin with an acrylic light brown color, and I really didn't like it, so I took it outside and spray painted it with Rust-Oleum paint and primer in a beige color. I was nervous about spray painting the foam pumpkin because I know they can melt from the spray paint, but maybe because it was already painted, it worked out okay. So I pre-cut thin strips of this tape. They were about 1 inch wide and folded over the edges so you couldn't tell that it was tape. They still have some of the sticky part showing, so you might not even need any glue to attach these. I decided they'd look best attached on the curve of the pumpkin as opposed to in the crevice, so I went around and spaced out my leather straps around the pumpkin. The straps mostly stuck on their own without any glue, but you may find you need some glue to help them stay down better. The straps needed a little embellishment, so I reached for my bag of Dollar Tree gold thumbtacks. I then stuck the thumbtacks in through the middle of the straps, which also helps keep them in place without any glue. I went in all around the pumpkin using about 4 tacks per leather strap. With all the straps and tacks in place, I grabbed some Waverly Antique Wax and a dry brush and gently brushed some color into the crevices of the pumpkin, which gave it a lot more dimension and a lot more depth. And this is how my leather strapped pumpkin turned out. I used one of my paper bag stems and a couple of green leaves, and I love the way this looks. I think it has a little equestrian, Ralph Lauren-y look to it. Let me know in the comments what you think, but I was overall pretty happy with how this turned out. And for pumpkin number 4, which I painted this lovely shade of green, though it makes no difference because we'll be covering it up anyway. So taking this green painted pumpkin and my Dollar Tree moss and some tacky glue, I proceed to cover the entire pumpkin with the moss. Why does moss have to be so messy? It is the messiest craft, second only to glitter, maybe. Let me know in the comments what craft element you think is the absolute messiest. For me, I think it's moss. I'm curious what you think. And because, well, we're already dirty, I figure I'll maximize my moss mess and use the tacky glue to glue just a little bit of moss into the crevices of these mini white pumpkins. We'll use them as accent pieces. Why not? So my glued moss had dried, and this is looking like some kind of animal. I am dating myself here, but with eyes and a nose, this thing could be a gremlin. Tell me I'm wrong. But anyway, I cut some jute nautical rope pieces to use in the grooves of this pumpkin and hopefully make it a little less gremlin-like. You guys are very lucky I cut out the footage of my burning my thumb horribly with the hot glue gun while gluing down this rope. All in the name of crafting, people. No pain, no gain. So I use hot glue and pull the rope tightly down into the grooves all around the pumpkin, and then I gave it a little haircut to even it out a bit at the end. I had some burlap ribbon and I cut out a bunch of leaf shapes and assembled those along with some painted Dollar Tree leaves and the stem that I had chose for this pumpkin, and then I assembled that all together. And this is how pumpkin number 4 turned out. This is a very earthy pumpkin. If you like nature, then this might be the pumpkin for you. Call me crazy, which is clearly not a stretch, but this pumpkin reminds me of the scarecrow from The Wizard of Oz, and I don't know why. I feel like singing If I Only Had a Brain. Okay, moving right along. Okay, pumpkin number 5, which may be my favorite. We are making a woven pumpkin using Dollar Tree foam pumpkin painted white and some cotton kitchen twine, which I had in my kitchen. First, I cut pieces of twine that would fit over the height of the pumpkin, and I cut many, many groups of 4 pieces of twine. And by the way, please excuse the back of my big blonde head, which for some reason makes an appearance in this particular clip multiple times. I mean, it's not like you're just going to see it once. My head keeps coming into frame, and that's what happens when you craft late at night and you're not paying attention to the camera, so I'm owning it. please forgive me. I'm really sorry. It's gonna keep happening. So here I've hot glued the first couple of groups of four pieces of twine together on the top of my pumpkin. We're gonna do that to all the rest of the groups of four. We're gonna weave them. So you need to make sure you have an uneven number of groups of four on your pumpkin, because weaving won't work correctly if the number of groups that you have is an even number. I think I ended up using 13 groups of four. So we are now going to cut a very long length of 4 pieces of twine, and this is what we're using to weave through the groups that are already glued on our pumpkin. So we just need a really long length to go wrap around the pumpkin several times, and that's a group of 4, just very, very long. I'm hot gluing the beginning of our weaving string to the top of the pumpkin and then under our first group of 4 strings, so that we can then begin the process of weaving, which is going to be basically over and under and over and under. Every couple of weaves, I'm going to take my hot glue gun and I'm going to glue the one little section just to keep everything from shifting or being pulled too much. And hopefully you'll see something over my big head. When you get toward the middle rounded part of the pumpkin, you're going to want to glue down a section more often, because that's when the twine has a tendency to slide down. And if you don't keep everything in place, you could end up with gaps in your weave, and that's not going to look very good. So keep adjusting and glue as you weave over and under. And if you do come to the end of your weaving twine, just gather another 4-piece long section, glue it down where you ended the last section, and continue weaving until you get to the bottom of the pumpkin. Now, when you do get to the bottom of the pumpkin, you're just going to take each of your 4-piece groups and glue them down onto the bottom of the pumpkin and trim the excess string. You're going to do that for all of your groups of 4 and just keep gluing and trimming until all the pieces are cut off and the bottom of your pumpkin looks neat and tidy. I then picked out a couple of green leaves from earlier and the stem that I wanted to use for this pumpkin from the extra that I made, and I assembled the top. And this is how my kitchen twine woven pumpkin turned out. Now, I did end up making 2 basic tassels out of the same kitchen twine and used them to accent the pumpkin. This might be my favorite pumpkin. It just screams fall or autumn to me. It looks cozy, like you want to cuddle with it. So these are all 5 of our DIY Fall Decor pumpkins. I really hope you like or maybe even loved at least one of them. I know for me, I was surprised at how much I really like some of these pumpkins, and this is coming from a person who normally hates pumpkins. Thank you so much for joining me in this, my very first pumpkin Palooza, and I hope it left you with a warm and fuzzy autumn vibe. I hope you enjoyed this Medicated Housewife DIY, and if you'd like to see more DIYs, hit the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Medicated Housewife, and crafting is my medication.